It is 8:36, and we're going to call this meeting to order. We do have a quorum present. Just by eyeball, I can see that we have Director Alviti, Commissioner Waldron, and Commissioner Morse. I don't see Commissioner Cruz, but we do have other phone numbers who've called in who that could be his number, but I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, we have to could you use those phone numbers so we can see who they are.
They are muted. And we have staff here who's managing that piece of it. We're going to start with public comment. There is public access that's granted both via Zoom in terms of video and on phone lines. If anyone from the public would like to be heard during our public comment period, if you could just make yourself known, and that way we would allow for public comment. Are you able to, Remy, are you able to unmute those 4 phone calls there? If you can unmute them. We're going to unmute those 4 lines at the bottom, and then we'll see. If anyone would like to be heard, please be known. Okay, I see that all 4 of those numbers, you may be staff people whose numbers I don't know. Again, we'll have another call. If anyone from the public would like to be heard, please speak up. Hearing none, we have the first item on our agenda. Remember, you can go ahead and mute those numbers. The first item on the agenda is the minutes of our April 8th, 2020 meeting, which was held remotely. So what we'll do is, I think we could do things like we normally would in a board meeting. If we just have a motion and a second, and I don't think we require a roll call vote because we can see everyone. So is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
There's a motion by Mr. Waldron, seconded by Mrs. Morse. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries 4-0. The next item of business is the annual election of officers. The offices that we'll be electing are the chair of the board, the vice chair of the board, the secretary of the board, and the treasurer of the board. And we'll do these one by one. Do we have a motion for the chair?
I'd like to move that Steve Wallach, our chair, continue as chair.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. I would make the motion to nominate Judith Morse as the vice chair of our board.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. I nominate Lori Karen Silvera as the secretary of the Rhode Island Turnpike and Bridge Authority.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. And the last officer we have is the officer of treasurer, and I would like to nominate Maggie Baker as the treasurer of the Turnpike and Bridge Authority.
I'll move.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item of business is the approval of the legal bills for Pannoni, Lopes, Devereaux, and O'Gara. This is for the months of March and April of 2020. The dollar figure is $54,296.59. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. The next item that we do monthly are the ratification of payments. I know the majority of this work was conducted on the Newport Bridge and the Jamestown Bridge to the tune of $2,200,256.70. Mr. Offenberg, can you give us a little rundown on this work that was conducted?
Yeah, certainly. As we're all aware of, the deck project is in full swing right now. We're finishing up phase 1, getting ready for phase 2 for this year. So the majority of expenses on the Newport Bridge are that. The Jamestown Bridge, we are doing some pier repair work and some underwater work. So you're seeing some of that reflective, as well as some miscellaneous consultant and inspection work in the bill.
Do we have I should have asked for this earlier. Can we have a motion to ratify, please?
I'll move.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any questions for Mr. Offenberg? Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Next item on our agenda is another annual move that we make, and this is to set the renewal and replacement fund requirement, which relates to our bond indentures. The dollar figure is $18,852,024. Let's have a motion, and then we'll have some explanation. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Ms. Baker, can you just explain to us what this is, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a yearly, as you had mentioned, annual fund requirement to do with the bond indenture. Usually it's based on annual inspections, which did not warrant any changes, so we're continuing to use the same number as we have used in the past.
Any questions for Ms. Baker or any discussion?
I do.
Director Alviti?
The $18,800,000 is set aside to comply with the bond agreements. Is that correct?
That it is part of the indenture, correct?
What part is this $18 million for?
Well, we have a $10 million deductible on the bridge insurance. That's a portion of it. And we feel if anything ever happened to the bridge, we need to keep that $10 million in this R&R replacement fund. And then, of course, if we had to do construction, we would need money quickly, and this would allow us to access that to start the project if we needed to.
And is this for a particular toll bond, or is it for the?
Well, it's just, it is the toll bond, because the other two bonds would be gas or fuel. So this is on the toll bond.
Do they also have set-asides like this?
Is David Ferrara on the call?
Yes,
Yes.
they do.
Could you provide me with a list of each of the bonds that are outstanding and how much is being set aside for each?
Well, the gas tax has a combined requirement under the single indenture. This it is as much. It's a smaller amount. I believe it's approximately 2.6 million.
David, you don't have to provide it today. If you could just forward to me each of the bonds that we have outstanding and any of the set-asides like this that we have for each of them.
Okay.
It might
Fair
be
enough.
good for all of us to see.
Yeah, if you just said that out to the whole board, that'd be great.
Great, thank you.
What do you think it is in total for all bonded indebtedness?
Well, the there's different reasons for all those separate set-asides.
I understand. I understand.
And what the total is, I can tell you what they are. That there's this $18 million, which is set aside for the Mount Hope and the Newport as reserve requirement. That's probably existed since 2003 in pretty much the same amount.
And is this $48 million that's on the document that's attached to our documents for the meeting? Does this represent the set aside for a $48,805,000?
I'm not familiar with where that is. I have a $48 million figure. I haven't seen that. Can you
I'm
tell
reading it from the documents for the meeting.
It's on the resolution.
It's on the resolution.
That's the toll bond. That is the,
That's just the outstanding amount of our bonds.
yeah, the toll bond, that's the balance, correct?
So that's the current balance of the toll bond.
Correct.
And
Yes.
for $48 million, we're needing to set aside almost $19 million.
No, that there are other set-asides. The $18 million is a reserve and replacement account to take into to make sure the bridge is up and running and the tolls are flowing.
I understand, but it's related to debt.
It's related to keeping the cash flow of the
Bridge.
Newport Bridge coming in to pay the
It's related
tolls.
to compliance with the bond agreement. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so we're having to set aside $19 million, $48 million worth of debt, according to the agreement.
Correct.
Okay.
It's not a reserve to pay the bonds. It's a
No, I understand.
reserve to
I
keep the
understand. It's
bridge
reserved
open.
to protect the
There
bond.
are other reserves.
Right.
David, I don't know that, if we can get that information, if Director, you're satisfied for this.
I think if I could get the list of information, if you could also, when you provide that list, provide the sources of the funding for these set-asides.
Sure.
Okay.
Yep, we can do that.
Great, thank you.
I'm not sure whether we had a motion on this. I think we did have a motion, but let's be safe.
I moved it.
Let's have you made the motion, Judy?
Yeah, I moved it.
All right,
Right.
there's-
Carol seconded.
Let me
it.
ask if it is necessary for any statutory reasons that we need to ratify this today, if we could wait to get the information that I requested, whether or not that creates any hardship to the Turnpike and Bridge.
Lori?
And I'm looking to David on this because I know that we were not, one of the reasons we were pushing the meeting back in May, we thought we would not have a June meeting. David, I think it was your feeling that it needed to be.
That has been, is a requirement of the toll indenture that it's existed for many years to establish this annually.
So it needs to be done in this fiscal year? Is that what you're
If
saying?
you had a June meeting, I'd be okay with that.
We can have a June meeting.
If you had a July meeting, it was last determined on June 12th.
Okay.
I didn't say it was necessarily fiscal. I hadn't thought about that. I would say that information's been provided to DOT on a certain date, which I can't think of off the top of my head, but
All
I
right,
can
well, here's the bottom
forward
line.
that same email.
Okay, thank you, David. What we will do is we will continue this matter until the material that Director Alvidi has requested is passed around to the entire board. And if necessary, we have no problem. This has been easy enough. We could certainly set up a quick board meeting for June. That's not a problem at all. So I'll make a motion to continue this matter until our June board meeting. Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item is our annual budget. I'm going to turn this over. Well, let's have a motion and then we'll have discussion. Is there a motion to approve the annual budget?
I'll move.
Second.
Motion and a second. Executive Director Karen Silvera.
So moved.
No, I know that.
I'm sorry. I'm getting the budget document up on the screen for you.
Okay.
So. I'm just going to hit share. I'm going to put all of you to, okay, so do you now see the budget document?
Well, we've distributed hard copies. If you're able to put it up, that's
Yep.
fine.
Yep.
I have a copy.
Yeah, I have it on my other computer here. Well,
Okay.
sorry.
Okay, thank you. So now you should be seeing on the screen as well, just for ease of viewing, that we have the budget document. I'm just going to say a few words about this document. Obviously, this has been a challenge to be developing a budget at this time when COVID-19 has interfered with our operations. And there was a question about the gas tax. So we based this budget on both a professional's review of the expected traffic projections in the coming months and in the upcoming fiscal year. And we also did receive some solid information on the gas tax from the state of Rhode Island. So with that, and with all of the reactions that we have given, and taken here in response to COVID-19, with that, our CFO and Tony, our CPA, and the rest of our finance staff, and all of the department heads have had the job of coming up with appropriate numbers to make a budget. So Maggie, our CFO, I'm going to hand it over to you to go through the budget.
And I just want to echo what Lori just said about how difficult this budget was with all of this. I mean, the economy, tourism, all the unknowns, and again, we put our best estimates together for revenue and expenses. So on the revenue side, if you want to start at the top of this budget document, I'm on the summary page. What we did with the toll revenue, which was the most difficult, we bottomed out actually in April for our toll revenue. And we had an outside consultant look at all our data. They also were the consultant who did all our toll data for our bonding in December. And they had all our history, all our revenue history, and we updated them. They analyzed all of this and provided a tier approach, which was from, what the best case scenario would be to the worst case scenario. We chose to come in mid-range for this number, so $1 million. And, again, you have to have a crystal ball here. We really don't know what's going to happen in the fall. The revenue is starting to shift. It was, low, very low in April, 60% reduction. It is now hanging up under the 50% mark. So I think that's a good number. That also includes our violations as well. And Kathy's department's done a great job trying to collect all those outstanding violations. The tax itself is, again, as Lori mentioned, was provided to us by the State Revenue Office. So we used their estimating number. And then all the other revenues I budgeted just as it has been in prior years, just to keep it conservative. Questions on the revenue side? Okay, on to the personnel and the benefits. So the next section, the wages were zeroed out, no increases. We have 3 employees that did have contractual increases that is included in this budget. We eliminated all the vacant positions that were still sitting from 2019 and half of the casual staff in both the Easy Pass and operations departments. Some retirements during the fiscal year did help us with reducing the wages a bit because they came in at lower rates to the people who had left, who were at the top rates. On to the expenses. Most of the expenses have decreased. There's been a few variations on that. So I'll highlight the ones that you may have questions on if you were looking at the increase to decrease numbers on this budget. The bridge insurance is up about 10%. The bridge inspections, they're higher than they were last year, but this is just a cycle of how the inspections are done from year to year. ETC operational expenses. The IAG group that exchanges all our Easy Pass files is making a change on how they do that. And so that has increased that budget. The debt service obviously is higher than it was the prior year with the addition of a new bond. Miscellaneous, which should be actually say administrative expense on that. The label is off. I have moved some professional fees out to that category, which is mostly related to HR and payroll related expenses. So that has also increased. Capital is higher than it was last year. We have a couple of back office changes. Well, we have a back office change that needs to be made in the Easy Pass operations. And that will be, a very large RFP that has to be done and all the vetting that has to be done to make sure that all that software will be working for that department. And then we still have the possibility of maybe converting 2 of our toll lanes to be automated. Some notable decreases here. We had a security program under the operations line. We have eliminated that. and travel and legal fees have been reduced. The biggest thing that was taken out of this budget to get it at least to balance at this point in time is normally we have a 5% contingency that we put in here, and that contingency is for any unexpected expenses. And it could be very large expenses like, for instance, environmental remediation. If that came up, that has to be put into our profit and loss statement. And if it's not budgeted, that creates a problem when we're doing our financials. So we have a limit, and we don't expect any environmental remediation to be done this year. So we have eliminated that contingency, which last year was in the 700,000 range, 769,000. This budget to balance itself to the best that we could. Any questions about the budget?
Any questions from the board? Any comments?
I just had a comment. I talked to Maggie extensively yesterday, going over line items on the budget. And I just want the board to realize this is a very, very tight budget. There's a lot of guesstimate going on because of COVID. So we're going to have to be very tight and very close when we're looking from month to month, okay, at what's going to happen for the next fiscal year. Okay, there's just a lot of variables going on in here, but it's extremely tight. And the fact that they took all the contingency is very concerning.
I have a question.
Director Alviti.
I'm sorry, Judith, if you're,
It's okay. No, it's okay.
on the contingency, how much of that contingency do you anticipate will be used through the current year?
Well, usually it's for something that it would be a project that would have to be done on the bridge that we were unaware of,
I
or,
understand.
right. So right now, we're not anticipating anything like that. That's why we took it out.
No, what I mean is, how much did you use during this current year?
So the
Well, I
figure is
have-
769,
right.
332.
So that's the
Right.
actual,
Yeah, that was the budget. That was the budget last year.
right? How much of it
only-
did you use?
We only had an environmental expense of $8,000 this year. The prior year, though, we had an environmental expense of almost $300,000. So that it came more into play that prior year. But this year it was
So
lower.
that $750,000 that's still there, where does that go, Maggie?
Well, it's just a budgeted item. So the only portion of that expense is the $8,000. So that's the only
So
thing. that
I
affects us.
understand that,
Yeah.
but where,
Mhm.
in the new year, where does that money go?
It's not like a fund, it's not like a cash account. It's just a budget item in case needed it to.
Right, so if you had a surplus in that budget item,
Mhm.
surplus for the current year.
Well, so if we're looking at actual revenue to expenses, that would not come into play. If you're looking at where we
So you
stood,
used it to
and
backfill the shortage in revenue, is that correct?
it would not be used to backfill the shortage in revenue. It's purely a budget item.
I understand.
There's no revenue stream from that. All that's going to do is it just changes the line between where we are in actual revenue and actual expenses to where we are in budget. We budget well the year before or not.
You just made reference to revenue as associated with that particular budget item. Talk about the relationship between the surplus amount that you have left after only spending.
I'm trying to see if I can explain it. So remember what a contingency is. It's just there as a budgeted item. It doesn't create any revenue. So it will,
Well, I understand that it's an expense.
okay.
But you only spent $8,000 of an $800,000 line item.
Correct.
So I think the question that's still unanswered is, where did the balance of that get absorbed? Did you have other expenses that you used that particular budget item surplus for? Or does it help to offset the shortfalls in revenue that you're experiencing because of gas tax and toll revenue?
Well, this is probably a good segue for me to go over to where we are, my projections through June 30th.
Right.
So at this time, I originally on my projections, I used the draconian figures of April, which was the bottom of the barrel in our mind. It looks much better. At this point, I'm seeing possibly, and I'm going to say this, and I'm hoping I'm wrong, you know, at 6:30, we're seeing about $300,000 deficit at this point. But we don't know what's going to happen in June, and the toll revenue is moving. So it looks like we're going to end up with a balanced budget. So that 669 would not even come into play in this case.
Right.
Okay.
But it helped, the fact that you only spent $8,000 of it helps keep it balanced. Is that correct?
Absolutely correct.
That's the question that was being
Yes.
asked.
Exactly.
So without that in the next year,
Mhm.
um,
Well, as Judy referenced before, she's absolutely right. This is a very tight budget, which will have to be adhered to. And it's just the way it is, and we will adhere to it. Hopefully that the toll revenue, which I've come in the middle number for, will as we go along. And so that's going to shift, you know, what happens the rest of the year. But it's
when you say
determined.
middle number, what do you mean by that?
Well, Stantec did a study, and the study, they had 3 scenarios. So I in between their draconian and the next number up, which is about $15 million.
And what was their low number?
Their low number was 13.
Could you provide a copy of that report to the board members, please?
Sure, absolutely.
Director Alviti, this is Lori Silvera speaking. I'm looking at it. Their estimates with short duration effects. I mean, so their worst case was 19. Their best case was 19 million. Their middle of the road case was 17.8. Their most severe was 13.6. We're already in the last couple of days. Last week, we were up in the 60% plus range, and yesterday we were at 64% of traffic, same time last year, same date last year. So
At the low point, what was the percentage?
The low point was in the middle of, I'd say it was April 1st, those first 2 weeks in April, and the low point was in the 40s range, 40% below.
Below last year at that same time.
Yes, but it has been steadily climbing, and we've been, every day we report numbers to the governor's dashboard, and every day, the magic formula is sunshine plus commuters, and on those days we've had days, as I say, where we're well into where we've had several days of being well into 60 and 64% even of where we were last year. So,
but looking at the revenue charts from tolling, it's apparent that the summer months in the tourism is really the bulk of the revenue comes from, right?
It does. It does start very high in July, and then it slides as it goes down towards the winter.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
but we're also, excuse me, we're also a commuter bridge. The base is beginning to come back. So
Right.
that
But the base represents about half of your summer traffic, right?
it does. Yep.
So tell me a little bit about how you came up at the $15 million as opposed to a more conservative estimate, low side of what Stantec provided.
Well, we ran our data through May 21st, and just through the 21st, we're at $600,000 in revenue, 21 days, and the month before that, we were much lower than that.
How
So
does that compare to last year?
compared to last year's full May, the May through, excuse me, through the 21st, the comparison is 600,000 versus 1.1. Okay. So it's starting to shift. We're seeing a shift going on here. The only thing that's going to give us a problem with this, if there is a reoccurrence in October, and that will not happen because, as the governor said, Rhode Island, residents are paying attention. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And people are tired of staying in, as we can see, as Lori mentioned, on these wonderfully nice days and weekends, people are moving along and they're coming over the bridge in the afternoon. They're going over and coming back. So we'll have a better, yes.
Yeah, so I mean, you're looking at it in terms of what you've seen on the ground over the past
Right.
month, and the trend.
Exactly.
The trend is not such that you would budget at that highest number because.
No, I wouldn't, I wouldn't, correct,
But
I wouldn't go
also,
to
you
the
wouldn't go
highest
to
number.
And you wouldn't go to the lowest number because
No.
you see the numbers percentage-wise are already ahead of that
Right.
case. That's correct.
Well,
And most certainly, we'll have a better sense if you happen to have another June meeting. Obviously, we can, speak to this again with better sense of numbers through the in the beginning of June, as we're getting more data coming through.
yeah, the question is where this levels off. It's not where it's trending right now, right? Because the actual revenue will depend on where the traffic volumes level off.
Mhm.
It has more to do with what kind of an impact all of this is going to have on the summer month traffic, right?
Right, and I think the biggest piece of the crystal ball, Peter, is really that, Director Alviti, that, it's how people feel. Will we have those people coming into Newport? The tourism
Right.
is huge. And so we'll just have to wait and see what's happening over there as we get data.
Talk a little bit about, I'm sure you had discussions about what you would do if in fact the project, because we're all in this kind of unknown territory with this.
Mhm.
Right?
Well,
And it brings a certain amount of uncertainty. So
Sure.
what are some of the contingencies that you have in mind if it does not play out to your revenue projections?
Lori, did you want to speak about that first?
Sure. And Director Alviti, this is following up on the question you asked at our last meeting. And we spoke to the fact after the meeting and addressed that obviously we would, as you suggested, take a very hard look at planned capital projects to see what can be put off. But of course, most of our capital projects are pegged to our bond revenue. We feel comfortable that our bond revenue is in appropriate amounts, and we're watching that very carefully. And even if we weren't, Fitch would make certain that we do, and they do make certain that we do. So we know that our bond revenue is going to cover our projects. However, we're keeping our eye on what can be pushed out. And I can talk about that some more. Liquidity is another issue. We've had one of the reasons that Fitch keeps reaffirming our bond rating at A with a stable outlook is because of our liquidity. We came into this crisis with a running start. Thank goodness we had a cushion. We were having a banner year, as opposed, had COVID-19 not happened, as Judy has pointed out, we wouldn't be in this situation of having to watch every penny. We had a nice cushion. That cushion took us right through March. Our numbers looked great right through the end of March, and we didn't start feeling the financial impact until April. As the COVID crisis began to unfold, many of our employees were in high-risk situations, either by age and or underlying condition. They went home. That included many of our toll collectors. So we had payroll costs that were lowered.
Lori, I don't mean to interrupt, but let's
Yes.
talk about the year going forward. I mean, everything,
Yes.
so let's talk about the projects that could be deferred. I think that's what
Yep.
Director
Yes,
Alvidi.
so the projects that could be deferred, on the, we've looked at each of the bridges, the Newport Pell Bridge, the tower and the suspended span painting, that would have been designed this year, and it would have been constructed next year at a cost of 11. Improvement on the Pell would have been designed this year. It would have been constructed next year at 2 million. The Secaucet, we had a masonry wall repair project and electrical and security upgrades, a weather station installation. This year and next year, that's about just under $1 million. We have the flexibility to consider whether we want to proceed with that. The Jamestown Bridge deck resurfacing, right now we have the railing, the painting project going on. The deck resurfacing could be put out. That would be $2.5 million. The Jamestown, the administrative campus, we had some plans for building expansion and retrofits of that campus. The design would have been $60,000 this year. We would have constructed it next year for $1.1 million. So these are just some of the projects that we are looking at that could be pushed out in the event that we are starting to feel that we need to push those out. We're not there yet. We are not at that point yet, but we certainly are prepared to do that.
So those are your capital projects, but we're talking about operating budget here, right?
Well, operating budget, yeah.
There's only $800,000 of capital expenditures funded by operating budget.
Well, our operating budget, as we've said before, coming back, we do see the revenue coming up. As you know, we work on two numbers. We work on traffic and we work on revenue, which maybe, we all know are two separate measuring tools for how we're doing financially. We've already seen in May that we're up 12%. I know, Director Alvidi, as you said, we can't just go on, the immediate increases. We have to try and have a crystal ball. We used, all of our numbers say that we're looking to do better than Stantec's worst case scenario in the coming months and the rest in the coming fiscal year. We also definitely have some payroll cost savings because we have been able to render the 2 outside lanes, 1 in each direction, automated, which is just an amazing, I can't tell you how, I call it one of the silver linings in the COVID cloud. And so that has enabled us to have no third shift. And it's also, we're now running that automated during the day. So there's no day shifts in there either. It's dovetailing nicely with what we have left of our collector staff, looking forward to the day in the future when we have free flow tolling 100%.
Yeah.
So that is, and in the meantime, Fitch just recently in the last week asked us for more information. I think we're still in a liquidity position that does not put us in any immediate trouble. And I think we're going to make it through this year, perhaps without a deficit, and going into next year, we are not looking at being in a negative position.
So I understand that, but as I said, looking at this operating budget, setting aside the capital expenses, your operating budget, and the reason Fitch, of course, was interested in more information is the same reason that I am interested in more information about this. Almost $15 million of operating expenses goes to paying debt right now. That's about half of your revenue, right? And that is fixed. You got to pay that. No matter what happens with your revenue, you got to pay that. Okay.
Right.
About $1 million, or $800 and some odd thousand dollars, $823,000 is capital expenditures that are funded by operating. So there is some ability to affect that, I understand, by reducing the projects. But that only affects that $800,000. The other large portion of your operating expenses is under your regular operation and maintenance kind of expenses. And that's where the real impact is going to be. If your projections, if your $15 million projection or your 13.9 projection is off. Now, the 13.9 you got from OMB, I understand.
Correct. Mhm.
15 from the Stantec report, if you're on that, the real effect it's going to have is on your individual operating funds, because you left yourself no contingency there to absorb any kind of fluctuation in the revenue. So, and that's what I was asking, if you had any ideas on if you begin to see over time that the total revenues are not following the pattern that you projected, and in fact they're following the worser case scenario that Stantec provided you. I'm sorry, Stantec?
Stantec.
Yes, yes.
And I'd like to get a copy of that report also, the Stantec.
Sure.
And a copy of the information that the bonding agency requested from you recently. I'm sorry, the bond rating agency requested from you. That is the area of my concern, right? You know, what kind of plans are you currently anticipating so that you can be proactive in addressing any shortfalls as they happen, rather than waiting until.
Maybe this is Kathy. Sorry to jump in here to answer some of your questions from, because obviously I'm a line item in the operating expenses. So to Laurie's point, we've already taken steps, you know, in addition to, because of COVID, closing our walk-in and reducing our call center hours and eliminating the third shift for the toll collectors. We will not, until we are sure that revenues are back. That has enabled us to reduce our workforce and redistribute how people pay for their account management. We will not bring those processes back until we're sure that the toll revenue is there. In addition to the response that we're doing it from a safety standpoint, we can take measures to address the safety standpoint to reopen our walk-in center and all of those other things. But unless the toll revenues are there, Lori and I have discussed, we're not going to bring back those processes, which has allowed us to handle the business, whether it's servicing RIDOT's back office program and the authority's own toll program. It gives us some wiggle room that we don't have to bring that back until the toll revenues are there.
And that's reflected on the expenditure side, Kathy, you're saying?
Correct. You know, so I budgeted for bringing it back, but if I don't see it coming back, the revenues, if this trajectory that we're on right now, if I don't see that trajectory happening, we will not be bringing the walk-in center back. We will keep the reduced hours on the call center. We will figure out other methods to service the customers once traffic starts to come back. So that's the way we've been able to service the customers.
Okay.
And just to segue, Director Alvedi, just to segue off of what Kathy is saying, you know, the budget, and there are some items that you're correct, we have to pay, we're obligated to pay, but there are other things in the budget that we could cut back, slow down based on the month-to-month revenue that we're seeing coming in. We have, again, back to Judy's point, tight budget needs to be addressed on a monthly basis very closely.
Any other questions?
I'll ask the same question of this as I did with the bond question that I had. Is, if we have a meeting in June, create a hardship if we deferred this so that we can receive the Stantec and other information that I requested here to review before ratifying this? Or is this time sensitive in that you need to have it ratified now by the board?
It normally is a June item. We do
Okay.
this in
We can
June.
hold off. I mean, I would suggest that we just, so we're not doing a budget at the end of June, so, that goes into effect July 1. We
Yeah.
should try to set something up the next couple of weeks, maybe within the first 2 weeks of June, I would suggest. And
I
then
would
that'll give us
appreciate that.
2 more weeks of looking at the revenue trends as well, with both the toll revenue coming in as well as the gas tax to see what, if any other estimates might change. So it gives us 2 more weeks of data. So let's look for another meeting probably in that second week of June. I mean, does anybody in the staff have an issue with holding off on final approval of the budget?
No, I don't.
A question, I'm not quite sure what could or would change since I'm seeing so many expenses going down as it is now, along with the revenue. I'm kind of going one to the other, and I'm saying, other than the bridge inspections, which I think we have to do, okay, in the operations cost in line 11, I think most of the expenses there are what they are. I don't see where we can cut out very much more. I mean, I'm really concerned. I mean, I was the other day that the previous budget was like 5.5 million, and now we're down to 22,000, okay? But I think if I'm hearing you right, the biggest issue we have is that 823,000 of projects that's the only cushion we really have that could be, I think, moved around to some degree that would help this to any degree.
That's
Okay.
correct. Right. I mean, if
I
we
think most of
decided
the others
that,
are so fixed and so tight, I don't see any
Right.
other place. Like Lori was saying, they could push things off. So I don't see any reason to necessarily postpone it. I think we just need to monitor it very closely because I think there's going to be a decision made as to, what projects, if any, we can put off and safely put off.
I certainly appreciate your view, Judith. I agree with you that that there are a large number of items on the expense side of this budget that are fixed, and that are immovable, which makes 2 things jump out at me on this: the lack of a contingency to absorb
I like that.
inaccuracies in the projection, the total revenue projections. That's why I'd like an opportunity as a board member to get my eyes on, in my mind, on the Stantec report, so that I could better understand how prudent the decision to allocate the amount that's being allocated here for revenue, and have some higher comfort level. I think, to the chairman's point, we're in uncharted territory, and another several weeks of looking at the actual revenues compared to previous year will provide additional surety in the direction that we go with projected revenue, tolling revenue in this budget, in this next budget. Because you're right, if those revenue projections are off, then there'll have to be some real hard decisions on some of the next
That's
line.
the issue, yeah.
I think it's a fair thing, and I agree with the director. If we get another 2 to 3 weeks of
Sure.
track record on what our revenue is, it's not about the expenditures necessarily. Although I do think it would be helpful to see what Kathy pointed out, whatever these operational expenses that we might be able to save on, to have that in writing before us, I think would be helpful as well. So even if we didn't have necessarily a contingency line item, if we know that $300,000 to $400,000 is something that we could play with if necessary, I think that might give everyone a lot more confidence. So
That
let's
becomes the contingency.
Yep,
You're right.
it's there. I think it's a fair request. So I'm going to make a motion to continue this budget to the June meeting, and we will see where we stand once we set a date. Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. The last item on our agenda is this is a resolution that would allow for the authority to basically make a contribution to a retirement plan, a compensation plan. This relates specifically to the executive director's contract, but what it also does is it allows the authority the ability to set up other retirement plans going forward for other employee groups down the road. Specifically, this would relate to the executive director's contract. Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll move.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please go ahead, Director Alvey.
What is the delta between previous years and this projected change?
I think the contribution is $8,000. Correct me, Maggie.
That is correct, $8,000.
And I'm
Yep.
not sure what it was in the prior executive directors. What do you know what it was?
Yeah, I can quickly, hold on one second. $12,000.
So it was $12,000 in the former contract, $8,000 for this year.
It wasn't a deferred compensation. That was just regular 401k match with a 3.4 discretionary, which would have been $12,000.
Okay.
This
Any
is
other
a
questions?
different one.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. I think we've heard much of the executive director's report. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add, Lori?
No, I think, what I was going to mention is that, we've done what the governor has asked, which is to keep some semblance of an economy moving, with all of the construction projects that are going on all four of the bridges. We have something going on everywhere because, as Director Alvidi has pointed out, while our primary obligation is to meet our debt obligations, but our second primary obligation is to keep these bridges safe and well maintained. So we've done that, and also and also kept the construction industry workers working. The second, and in the meantime, as I say, we were able to respond to this problem of having, we went from 101 employees in March down to, I believe, 81 at the low point of the COVID crisis. And we were able to compensate for the departure of our collecting staff by rendering the two outside lanes automated. And it was a victory for all. We have no issue with the union at this point. We are talking, I should mention that the contract expires at the end of June. We have been talking to them about an extension of that contract, and obviously Maggie has built no increases in for the reasons that we've all discussed today in this meeting. That's about it.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the executive director? Well, I'd like to do two things. Thank everyone for participating. I think this was a very fairly smooth meeting, and we had a good discussion, and we're able to grant public access. I also want to congratulate our colleague, Professor Morse, on her retirement from Providence College. Well deserved.
Thank you. 30
Congratulations.
years. I'm out.
Yay.
God bless you.
Congratulations.
You ready to move into your next career, Judith?
Yeah, relaxation.
It's all well so far. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move.
There's a motion to second. All those in favor of the motion to adjourn at 9:30 a.m., please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Thanks for your help,
Stay
everybody.
safe.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.